legally questionable use of these new powers.
I authorize the National Security Agency to intercept the international communications of people with known links to Al-Qaeda and related terrorist organizations.
But by May 2006, it emerged that not only was the American government listening to international calls, it was also monitoring the domestic phone records of millions of innocent Americans. One of the astonishing parts of this case is the sheer numbers involved. Since 9/11, the National Security Agency has been analyzing without consent the telephone calls of nearly 300 million Americans. That's estimated to be 1.9 trillion calls. This type of mass surveillance is no longer the stuff of science fiction. The NSA phone tapping case is an example of data mining, a new technique that means the records of your internet searches, your bank transactions, credit card purchases and phone calls can all be searched in seconds for certain patterns of behavior, such as regularly calling the Middle East. The hope is that these patterns will help to identify potential terrorists. But Jay Stanley at the American Civil Liberties Union believes that the technique of data mining is a serious threat to our privacy.
We're living in a world where more and more information and data is created about us, where we pass through sensors or cameras and computers, and we buy things and we enter places and use electronic key cards. And each of those pieces of information might be harmless on its own, that you were at this place at this time. But when you bring each of those pieces of information together, they're like pixels. Yeah. You could form a very high-resolution image of somebody's life to a degree that really is quite spooky. And I think that most people, if they knew the extent of the possibilities in this area, would be quite alarmed.
And it's very difficult to persuade people of the deep and lasting change it's going to bring to their lives. And that's what you do. And how do you do it?
People say, I've never done anything wrong. And my answer to that is, are you sure? There are a lot of laws on the books, a lot of complicated laws in the books, a lot of laws where the prosecutors and the police have a lot of discretion to interpret the laws, and if they decide that you are their enemy, you're public enemy number one, and they have the ability to go through your life with a fine-tooth comb because your privacy has been destroyed, they will find something. Chances are pretty good.
This is the reality of living in the digital age. Almost everything we do leaves an electronic trail. But just in case you think this cannot happen in the United Kingdom, think again. It's recently been revealed that the CIA has accessed European bank accounts. SWIFT is the international money transfer system used by 7,500 banks and financial institutions in 200 countries. It processes $6 trillion a day. In June 2006, the New York Times revealed that the CIA had subpoenaed SWIFT for access to their vast number of financial transactions. The paper claimed that the program led to the capture of the mastermind of the 2002 Bali bombing and helped identify a man laundering money for Al-Qaeda. But it also emerged that possibly as many as 20 million British banking transactions were included in the information made available to the US government. However, there's a question that nobody seems to be asking. Does the success rate of these mass surveillance programs justify their existence? Or has the public fear of terrorism been used for political gain? Since 9/11, the Bush administration has brought in blanket surveillance programs. But is this really the best way to deal with the modern threat of terrorism? Al Gore, once vice president and recently recast as the conscience of liberal America, is now warning of the dangers of this new obsession with surveillance.
The Bush-Cheney administration chose to use the war against terror as a basis for both political argument in a partisan context and for an assault on the individual rights, including the right to privacy, including the right to be free of government eavesdropping. These rights have been weakened now. The use of fear to acquire power has a rather old provenance.
Yes.
Politicians from time immemorial have used that tactic. It's always been effective.
I wonder if you think this blanket surveillance is a good way of tracking.
No, it's not. It's not effective in its own terms. I talked to an FBI expert who put it this way. He said, "We're looking for needles in haystacks."
Yes.
And the Bush-Cheney administration keeps piling more hay on top of the stacks. And the routine mass collection of all of these conversations and communications is not only an invasion of privacy, it's also completely impractical as a way of finding threats to security that are legitimate. They had the names of the hijackers on 9/11. They had their telephone numbers. They were listed in the book under their own names. Two of them were, and yet they had so much hay to sort through.
Yes.
They ignored those pointed facts and said, "Oh, we need to collect more mass data." It's not the right way to do it.
If I just can ask then, if you feel that in today's climate and with these great terrorist threats, we should change our views of civil liberties.
Well, I don't think so. To use that hypothetical as an excuse for the routine destruction of civil liberties, I think is a serious abuse of democratic traditions.
In Britain, we have now got the legislation to build an ID card. Do you feel that Americans would accept this? What is a very big step for a population to accept?
In the U.S. context,
Yes.
a national ID card has always been resisted precisely because it has been seen as a very powerful tool which, in the hands of the wrong kind of government, could be a means for abusing all privacy.
Social control, really.
Yes, that's right.
And as we enter an age where total surveillance is now a technical possibility, I think we need to ask if governments should be given these powers. Many of these programs are secret, so it's hard to challenge them. I believe it leaves them open to abuse. And I can already see it happening at America's airports. After 9/11, flying to and in America has become a civil liberties disaster area. In response to the attacks, the US government has compiled so-called no-fly lists, which are supposed to be made up of people with known terrorist associations. There are over 100,000 names on them, and if your name matches, you will either be prevented from flying or made to go through extra security. The US government claims to be using these powers to make it hard for terrorists to operate, but there's growing evidence that it's also making it hard for anyone who dares to question its policies. Jan Adams and Rebecca Gordon are die-hard anti-war activists. They published an anti-war paper, War Times. They believe that this was enough to put them on a no-fly list.